Imagine being at sea, and getting caught in a violent storm in the middle of the night. You rush to get ashore, but the moment you see land, your engine dies. And the winds sweep you away to the middle of the ocean. What would you do? Hello and welcome to Foolproof Survival, where we learn how to survive in the wild, one video at a time. Let's embark on this journey with the top 3 insane tales of survival at sea. So strap in, and let's go. Number 3, Poon Lim. We start our countdown with a World War II veteran that survived 133 days alone at sea. It is almost impossible to comprehend all the bad luck that had befallen the poor soldier, but he managed to battle through it and emerge victorious in the end. It all began in 1942 when World War II was already raging on all fronts. Great Britain was crippled. What was once the greatest naval force in the world had become but a shadow of its former self. It called other countries for help, and one of the nations that answered that call was China. Poon Lim was one of many Chinese soldiers that became sailors on British ships. Soon he found himself a steward aboard the SS Ben Lomond. He pretty much hated it. The cabins were too small, and he was often sick, and constantly being teased by the crew. The ship wasn't a great warship either. It was slow and not very well armed, so it became an easy target for the enemy. All it took was a German submarine to pass by, flick a few torpedoes in its general direction, and down the Lomond went. They say she sank so fast that she sucked down water around her, and with it, all 55 members of the crew. Only 11 survived, and Poon Lim was one of the lucky ones. Ah, scratch that. The other 10 were luckier as they were quickly rescued. But our hero, he was just about to embark on a 4-month vacation being lost at sea. He managed to climb on top of a wooden raft. The raft had a small canvas roof, as protection from the sun. Lim also had some provisions such as a 40-litre jug of water, a few cans of biscuits and crackers, a little bit of beef jerky, lumps of sugar, lime juice, malted milk tablets, and some chocolate. More importantly, he also had a flashlight and some flares. Lim believed he would be rescued soon when the authorities realized the ship was missing. So he rationed the food for 30 days. However, a month has come and passed, and help was nowhere to be seen. He realized he had to quickly come up with a plan. He managed to use the canvas in his life jacket as a rain catchment system. He also dismantled the flashlight, combined its wire with the jagged edges of the tins of biscuits, and made a small fishing hook. He knew he would need to eat some meat, and seagulls were all around. So he made a makeshift nest from the seaweed from the bottom of the raft, and placed a dried fish in it. Once a seagull landed, he would catch it, drain it of blood, and dry the meat with salt water. Hey, maybe this was the first seagull jerky ever in the history of man. His ordeal ended on day 133 when he was picked up by Brazilian fishermen. His story became famous, and he was even awarded a medal by King George VI. Of course, there's much more that happened to poor Lim, and I promise to dedicate a separate video just to his story. Number 2, Steve Callahan. If someone wanted to write the perfect story about a man struggling to survive at sea, reality already beat him to it. This is the true story of Steve's 76-day battle to overcome the dangers of the sea, including sharks, hunger, and thirst. But most importantly, he had to overcome himself. Steve fell in love with sailing early on. Being an introvert, he found sailing alone to be much more appealing than spending time in a crowded city. He went as far as designing and building his own sailboat. He named the boat Napoleon Solo, after a popular TV series character. With a friend, he made the inaugural journey across the Atlantic. The sailing went so smoothly that he decided to do the return trip alone. Things started going nicely. But on day 7, that was about to change. Steve was asleep in the cabin when something, presumably a whale, hit the boat. Cold water started rushing in, and in a split second, Steve realized it was over. He had to abandon the ship. He grabbed his inflatable raft and his emergency bag and rushed outside. Steve tied the raft to the boat, went back and dove inside the cabin. It was pitch black, but by memory, he managed to locate other items. He returned to the raft and couldn't bring himself to leave the Napoleon Solo, which was slowly but surely sinking. Then nature stepped in and helped him make that decision, as a huge wave smashed the raft and the line broke. That was it. Steve watched his boat go down, into nothingness. He was all alone, in a small inflatable raft, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. But he didn't despair. He knew that in order to survive, he must remain focused. Steve realized that this was just a continuation of his voyage, although under somewhat different circumstances. The two most important items he had were the desalinator, which allowed him to make about half a liter of drinking water per day, and the spear gun, which helped him catch a lot of fish, but almost ended up killing him. On day 43, he speared a fish, but the fish broke the speargun shaft and tore a hole in the raft. He spent 10 days unsuccessfully trying to fix it, and almost lost all hope. Then on day 10, he decided to give it another go and succeeded. When he was finally found by a fishing boat, Steve had lost a third of his body weight. But he survived, and wrote a best-selling book that eventually got made into a film. Tell me in the comments below if you want to hear about how Steve developed a split personality, just to keep himself alive. Number 1. Jose Salvador Alvarenga. Our top spot goes to a real-life castaway who survived more than 13 months on a broken-down boat. Apparently, he had traveled over 6,600 miles on the whim of the ocean currents. Just before Christmas 2012, Jose and his friend named Cordoba were caught in a violent storm, off the coast of Mexico. The ship was only 7 meters long, and had no cabin, just a small motor, and a refrigerator for storing fish. Even though they knew a storm was coming, they set out to catch fish, 120 kilometers from the shore. The storm hit them at 1 a.m., and they sped towards land, throwing away everything they possibly could, so the boat would go faster. They came to about 24 kilometers from the shore, and they could already see the mountains in the distance. But the small motor had enough, and called it a day. They had no oars or sails, and the extremely strong wind started pushing them out to the ocean. They managed to call their boss on the radio and report their location, but at that moment, the battery also decided to call it a day. In just 5 days, the wind had blown them 450 kilometers off the coast, before it too called it a day. With no flares, no radio, and no provisions at all, their chances looked slim. Their boat was so small it could not be spotted from the air. And they had thrown all their supplies overboard. They managed to find some plastic bottles floating, and used them to collect rainwater. They also managed to catch small fish, turtles, and even birds. When there was no rain, they drank the blood of turtles or their own urine. Alvarenga's young companion had a much tougher time coping with the situation. He couldn't take it anymore and refused to eat or drink water. 4 weeks into the drift, Cordoba passed away. Alvarenga couldn't cope with throwing his body away, so he spent days talking with him. When food and water ran out, even Alvarenga thought about ending his life. Still, he managed to persevere. On January 30, 2014, he was thrilled to see some coconuts floating around his boat. Also, it seemed as though more and more birds were flying around. Soon he saw the land, but it took him a lot of time to float near enough so he could jump out and swim ashore. He managed to find a house, knocked on the door, and saw the first human since he and Cordoba started their journey 438 days ago. In that time he traveled over 11,000 kilometers and ended up on Ebom Atoll, which is basically a speck of dirt belonging to the Marshall Islands in the vast Pacific Ocean. Soon after, Alvarenga was flown home, and he had some peace of mind. That is, until he wrote a book. As soon as he signed a book deal, Cordoba's family sued him wanting 50% of the proceeds. Why, you might ask? Because they claimed he had eaten his young friend. Funny how they didn't say a thing until a book deal was done. Anyway, Jose still claims his innocence, and there is no way really to know with certainty what happened. I hope you liked today's video, and please comment on which story was most interesting, and which one you want to hear in more detail. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. See you next time.